Hello and welcome back, goats, to the Big Blue Purple channel. Today I want to talk about a game that I've been playing on and off for about a year and a half now. But before we get into the video, in true Big Blue Purple fashion, I want to give a huge shout out to the 1.9% of you who are subscribed to this channel. We are so close to that 2% milestone. Help me hit it, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the Big Blue Purple channel to 2% subscriber rate. Anyways, with that out of the way, I want to talk about a game called 30XX. You may or may not have heard of this game. It's not very well known unless you were a player of the previous game called 20XX. Now, back around 2015-2016 when I got my PC, I was looking for Mega Man games on Steam or something similar to Mega Man to play because I was a huge fucking Mega Man fan back then. And I still am, let's be real. But anyways, I found 20XX. 20XX was a roguelike Mega Man game with a different kind of art style, different kind of direction, and 4 different playable characters in the time that it was a game. It got tons of updates. I bought the game when it was in early access, but when the game released, it had so much content and stuff to do. Anyways, I kind of played this game for around 25 hours or something on Steam and stopped playing it. I thought it was really cool. I liked it a lot, but I just kind of got sick of it and moved on. Now, back in February of 2021, they released 30XX, the sequel to 20XX, and it is still currently in alpha, and it gets a patch every couple of months, and they're usually pretty major patches that change a lot of things. A major part of 30XX that got me interested in it right when I saw that it was announced was the art style change from 20XX. If you look at 20XX, it's a much more kind of cartoony and indie-like art style that you'd expect to see. But 30XX takes the more SNES pixelated 16-bit approach in its art style, yet it still plays so goddamn fluidly, arguably more fluidly than the previous game. Seriously, this game just has better movement than all of the official Mega Man games, save maybe the Zero series. It is that good, it feels that good to play this game. Now, the interesting spin that 30XX and 20XX took on the Mega Man formula is the idea of it being a roguelike game. If you die, you go back to the very beginning of the game, and you need to start from square one. Now, when you think about a Mega Man game with 8 Robot Masters, 8 stages you need to get through, and then a bunch of Wily stages, that could sound pretty daunting to have to restart a Mega Man game every time you die. But 30XX does a fantastic job of making a super addicting progression system with its upgrades and its challenges. And it also includes 2 playable characters at the moment, being Ace and Nina, which represent Zero and X. Ace is your Swordsman Zero character, whose abilities are kind of entwined with his moveset, and Nina is your typical Mega Man X character, where you need to collect energy, you need to use your special abilities, and bosses have certain weaknesses and whatnot. So if you've played a typical Mega Man game or whatever, you're probably wondering how the stages work. Like, do you just pick one of the main 8? Is it like Mega Man 8 where you pick 4 and then the next 4 show up? Or how does it work? Well, actually, the first stage you get is pretty much random, actually. There's an upgrade you can get later in the game that basically lets you pick the stage you get first. It's like a very high chance that you'll get that stage that you picked. For me, I like picking the Clockzone stage. This is because Ace gets an insane mobility upgrade here with a grappling hook. It's so good. Either way, the interesting part comes in when you've completed your first stage. Once you complete a stage in this game, you actually are given 3 options as to where to go next. This is kind of your Mega Man stage select-esque thing being put into a roguelike. That way, there's always some RNG on which stages you get to go to. You might not get your favorite boss order every time, but you still get a degree of choice that makes it feel like Mega Man. I feel like this stage structure is just the perfect answer to putting the Mega Man formula into a roguelike, at least in terms of stage selection. There's still a degree of player choice, but there's also enough RNG to keep it interesting. Now, in a roguelike game like this, the most appealing aspect of it is typically what kind of items can I collect on a run, what kind of upgrades can I get within a run. And 30XX, especially over the course of its development time in its alpha, has come up with some fucking awesome items and synergy. When I first got into 30XX, back when it was kind of new, the meta, or not even the meta, but what I was doing to beat the game was pretty boring. You just get as many like strength bands and speed upgrades as you can, so you do the most damage and run as fast as you can. Now, the way items work has been changed quite a bit so that you actually want to go for more item synergy and how they work together. A particularly interesting one to me would be the repros, or essentially the little buddies you can pick up along the way. They're these little robot friends you'll be able to get as items, and they'll do a little something for you. In the background, you see me using the shield repro, which I picked up in this run, and it basically blocks any projectile that hits that shield. This is an absolutely insane ability, and it's like way better than just getting a bunch of health upgrades because it saves you from taking the damage in the first place. And of course, what kind of roguelike would this be if there wasn't any items that gave you a positive and a negative effect? This is where the very safe labs come into play within 30XX. Very safe labs are essentially like your lunar items from Risk of Rain, where they'll give you one positive, but they'll also give you a negative. And sometimes it's hard to decide if it's even worth it, because a lot of these very safe lab upgrades completely change the way you approach the game, and that's what makes them interesting. Let's start with a very simple example of a prototype augment from one of these very safe labs. The Charging Force upgrade is one of the simplest to understand. It just makes it so your charged attacks do 50% more damage, but your uncharged attacks do 50% less damage. This completely changes the way you want to approach your run because you're pretty much never going to be using uncharged attacks. Perhaps a more interesting prototype augment would be the Vexing Clover. What this guy does is it lets you re-roll any item that you get for completely free. However, whatever that re-rolled item is will be immediately picked up. That means if you get an item that isn't good for your build or potentially detrimental, as there is items in this game that exist to be detrimental, then this could be a scary item to pick up. There's tons and tons of different prototype augments in the game, and I don't want to go over all of them, but these are just some basic examples where I don't need to break down a bunch of things about the game for you to understand what they do. Another type of upgrades I wanted to talk about in this game would be your armor upgrades. So, throughout 30XX, you can actually find armor augments in the game which give you certain bonuses depending on which part of your body they're for. Leg upgrades will typically give you some sort of mobility tool like a double jump or an air dash. The arm upgrades will typically give you some sort of damage increasing augment, like, let's say, charging your attacks faster and then just giving a straight strength boost to your attacks. My favorite arm upgrade has to be the Dracopent's Claw. This one lets you charge to a 3rd charge level, which is green, and it does way more damage than your normal charge level. The body upgrades are typically more defensive focused, like the Oxjack one, which puts up a shield in front of you when you're dashing. This lets you essentially dash through projectiles and just block them. The helmet upgrades are typically more miscellaneous and kind of more tie-in with what the rest of the armor set does. For instance, the Dracopent one makes it so when you charge an attack, your next attack will also be a charged attack. This synergizes super well with getting a 3rd level of charge like I mentioned earlier. The Oxjack helmet makes it so when you dash, you shoot out a little projectile out of your head. This synergizes super well with the chest plate, which puts up a shield when you're dashing, so essentially you get offensive and defensive capabilities while dashing. The armor sets synergize super well within their set, but they also synergize really well with parts outside of their set, and that's what makes them so interesting. Learning to mix and match which cores you get, and on top of that, getting more CP so you can equip more cores, and CP stands for core points, let's get that straight. Core points just make it so you can equip more pieces of armor at a time. This means that if you have 2 chest plates, for instance, and you have enough core points, you can actually just equip both of the chest plates at the same time and get both buffs. I believe in the original 20XX, that's not how it worked at all, and you could only have 1 piece of armor per slot. So this adds a ton of variety between runs when it's like, yeah, I can get this armor piece that I like getting, but I can also try to mix and match it with other armor pieces that might synergize with it better. Now, having talked about the armor pieces, this lets me segue into glory zones, which are the pretty much easiest way to obtain these armor pieces if you don't get lucky at a shop. Essentially, the glory zones are challenge rooms you can find on each stage, and each glory zone will have its own kind of challenge you need to complete. The most common one that I see most of the time is just take 0 damage, and if you do take damage, then your reward gets knocked down to the next tier below. Basically, there's 3 tiers of rewards: gold, silver, and bronze. You are guaranteed to get the bronze reward no matter how shit you are at the game, but the gold reward and the silver reward will also be available, and when you finish the glory zone, you'll be able to pick which of those rewards you want. Now, sometimes the best reward really is just the bronze one, but other times the reward you want is in the gold slot. This encourages you to try to take your time through these glory zones and beat them perfectly. On the topic of challenges, they also added this guy at the beginning of every stage, who will essentially give you a challenge if you talk to him, and if you complete said challenge, you are granted some sort of reward. Now, the way the challenge works is that you get a debuff for the rest of the level, and if you complete the level under that debuff, you will get the reward that the guy listed. Sometimes the challenge isn't too bad, it's just like, one of them is like ghosts will follow you around, which makes it so when you kill enemies, they'll respawn like 5 seconds later. It just makes it so you need to progress the stage really fast. This is my favorite one to get because I feel like it's pretty easy to deal with, but some of them can be really hard, like no health pickups dropping and stuff like that. Again, it just lends itself to that roguelike formula so perfectly, weighing the risk versus reward. Do I want to take this challenge for the chance of something really good, or do I want to play it safe for this stage and just hope I get something better next time? And remember, this game is still in alpha at the moment. It hasn't even entered any kind of beta yet, and we don't know when this full game is going to release. Currently, there are 7 stages, so there should be an 8th one coming sometime maybe next year, I imagine. And then we'll finally start getting the final stages in tone with kind of like the Dr. Wily stages from original Mega Man. But 7 stages, if you didn't know, is already like a huge step forward for the developers of this game, because in the original 20XX that came out, there was actually only 4 different types of stages, but there were 8 bosses. This meant that on every run you would visit every single stage twice. There was a forest stage, an ice stage, a sky stage, and a fire factory stage. All 4 of these stages would be in each run 2 times because there was 2 bosses in each of those stages. In 30XX, you can see all the love that the devs are putting into each individual stage. Every single stage has its own unique gimmick. Every single stage has its own unique mini-boss. Everything just feels super complete and fleshed out, especially for a game in its alpha. Obviously, we don't even have all the stages yet, so it's clearly not a finished game, but every stage that is out feels very well made. And especially with the recent rework to the Echocave stage, they just made that stage so much more interesting with a new gimmick they added. Now, some things I would like to see out of this game, being that it's only an alpha and there's tons and tons of improvements that can be made, I would absolutely love to see a couple more characters like 30XX, or like 20XX rather, even if they're sold as DLC like they were in that game. They were like $2 DLCs, which was super cool. They all just functioned very differently and had their own playstyles. But as a counterpoint to my own desire there, in 30XX, there are far more weapons for each character. Like Ace can get a hammer or a spear or all this other shit that completely changes the way his kind of kit works. It even changes his normal special. Like the sword gets a boomerang, but then the hammer gets like a throwing hammer. Still though, I'm sure the devs can come up with something original and interesting for their own characters down the road. This is just something that obviously shouldn't be focused on until the game is complete. Another thing I'd really like to see from 30XX is like more uses for those tokens you get in runs. Tokens in 30XX are just essentially like a currency you can use to spin a slot machine. The slot machine shows up sometimes at the end of a level right before the boss, and if you roll it, you have a chance to get health, items, whatever. But to my knowledge, that's actually the only thing you can spend these tokens on right now. So when I see a challenge that's like, oh, you get 3 tokens if you complete this, it's like, do I really care that much? Like, not particularly. This is where I think they can do something really interesting with tokens, keep this whole slot machine idea with them, and maybe create a token shop where you can gamble for certain items. I don't have a very clear vision on this right now, but I'm sure you can see what I'm getting at. Just kind of like another new shop in the game that you go into. You can roll different slot machines with different possibilities of items, and it'll add more to that whole roguelike setting. All in all though, this game has fucking insane potential. I seriously can't wait to see where this game goes in the next few years and how much better it can get, because it's already an amazing game, and I think it's already arguably better than 20XX was, even though it's obviously less complete than that game. And of course, the music that you've been hearing in the background of the video this whole time is from the game, and it's fucking amazing. It's so like, it's got that Mega Man vibe to it while still feeling like it's its own type of game and has its own unique music. Honestly, they just did a fantastic job with the environment, making the game feel like a Mega Man game while also feeling like its own unique idea. Anyways, this video was just kind of a side thing for me where I wanted to talk about this game and hopefully get more people to try it if they're into Mega Man or into roguelikes. Because ultimately, I think this game is going to be really, really fucking good when it finally comes out. If anything in this video, whether it be the gameplay, the way I was talking about it, the systems I mentioned, whatever it may be, please, please, please give this game a shot if even you're just a little bit interested in it, because I promise you that this game is something special, and over the next couple years, I think when they finally do finish this game and release a completed product, it'll be one of the best roguelikes on the market. And if you're already a Mega Man fan and somehow haven't tried this game, I beg you to give this game a shot. It is so fucking good, and I know that you will find something to enjoy about it. Besides, it's not like Capcom's going to give us another Mega Man game anytime soon. Anyways, I think that's going to wrap up this video. I just kind of wanted to gush about 30XX a bit, hopefully get it out there to a couple more people so that they can give the game a shot. If you enjoyed anything about this video, drop a like, subscribe to the Big Blue Purple channel if you're not already, and go out there and play yourself some 30XX.